Hey, welcome back to Well, That's Interesting, the I can relate to both of these things edition. Today is episode 213, Like Humans, Apes Communicate to Start and End Social Interactions, and the daring escape and survival of Flamingo 492. My friends, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The more we look at the creatures around us, the more we recognize a bit of ourselves. From sperm whales having their own phonetic alphabet, as we learned about in episode 203, to African elephants having name-like calls for each other, as we heard about in episode 201, to how the fad-loving boat-ramming orca juveniles along the Iberian coast are just a couple of punk-ass kids with extra time on their fins. As explained in episode 199, all of this hits close to home. No pun intended. Those three topics, by the way, were covered in just the last few weeks. But over the years, I've lost count of how many episodes we've done focusing on the latest discoveries on animal behavior. They just keep coming. And today, we're going to tack on two more. In the first half of the show, salutations to unhinged sign-offs and emails. We humans have many a way to say hello and goodbye. Their associated words and gestures are so ingrained and such a standard practice, it's hard not to take them for granted or to overlook their importance. As Rafaela Hassine, a postdoctoral researcher at Durham University in the United Kingdom, so aptly explained in a press release this past August, quote, "We were able to launch rockets and land on the moon because we have the ability to share our intentions, which allows us to achieve things so much bigger than a single individual can achieve alone. This ability has been suggested to be at the heart of human nature." End quote. My friends, sharing intentions or working together on a common interest leads to a mutual sense of obligation. This kind of behavior, which we are putting under a microscope today, is known as joint commitment. And it all starts with hello. Like, hey, how's it going? I'd like to land on the moon. Do you want to help out? Now, joint commitment was long believed to be only a human thing. But we know how that kind of thinking goes on a podcast like this. It's usually blown out of the water by researchers who dare ask, "Girl, are you sure about that?" Researchers like Rafaela. She and her team reviewed thousands of interactions within groups of bonobos and chimpanzees in zoos, and wouldn't you know it, they have their own versions of hello and goodbye. And just like with us, the length and type of hello and goodbye changed with who they were interacting with. Now, bonobos aren't trying to get to the moon, but they do have relationships to maintain. And to do that, they need these signals. We will get into the study that made this discovery. We will get into the shocking statistics on how often what's called entry signals and exit phases were used, and how understanding their behavior helps explain ours too. Then after the break, a lot has happened in 2022, so you're forgiven if you don't completely remember one particular story that went viral at the time. A flamingo was spotted in Edna, Texas. Fun fact, flamingos aren't from Texas. They are native to tropical and subtropical areas, depending on the species. For example, they could be found in Africa, the Middle East, the Western Mediterranean, and Northwest India. Or they could be found in the high Andes of Peru, Chile, Bolivia, and Argentina. So please be sure to tell your racist neighbor with the flamingo lawn ornament. Now, the flamingo that we're talking about today was spotted in 2022. And we know that that one was from Tanzania in Africa. And we know this thanks to a little identification tag on its leg. And thanks to that tag, we also know it's the same flamingo that's been on the loose since 2005, when it escaped an enclosure in Kansas. Well, we will get into how in the holy hell a bird an ocean and a continent away ends up in Texas, and how it could possibly survive there, wild and free. We will get into how far back this story goes. We will get into the human behavior that caused it. And best of all, we'll talk about how, odds are, it's still out there, alive and evading capture. We will get to it. In the meantime, hi, I'm Jill Chacha, and if this is your first time listening, well, welcome to the flock, my valorous business goose. To begin, we're going to take a good look at ourselves for a moment. And I mean a really good look. It's going to get technical, so stick with me. We are going to figuratively zoom in, slow down, and give a thorough probing analysis to two types of interpersonal behaviors every single one of us does, every single day, probably dozens of times a day, and it barely crosses our mind. I'm talking about the interactions of hello and goodbye. Let's consider why we need them in the first place. In the intro of the show, we brought up something called joint commitment, where one or more folks approaches one or several other folks, all in hopes of sharing a mutual intention or working together on a common interest. If successful, this leads to a mutual sense of obligation. So, for this to be successful, according to the study we're about to dive into, it's best to think of joint commitment as not only a product, but a whole-ass process. That study, titled Assessing Joint Commitment as a Process in Great Apes, published just this past August in the journal iScience, explains this process as, quote, the exchange of signals necessary for would-be co-participants to arrive at the mutual belief that they are committed to a course of action where each has his or her part to play. And before they even do that, they need to coordinate the very possibility of interacting together, creating the participation framework for a social encounter. End quote. Well, my friends, that was a fancy technical way of saying when we approach someone and we want it to go well, we first need to bust out the proper social cue we think is going to work for that situation and that person. I'm talking about a kind of hello or entry phrase. But don't be fooled, it's not always verbal. In fact, most of the ways we initiate an interaction is nonverbal. I'm talking about eye contact, the length of that eye contact, the distance between yourself and the other person, a touch, a hug, or a kiss even before we start talking. All of these cues are for the other party to pick up on and reciprocate. I mean, that is if they are up for what you just threw down. I mean, if they are, then congratulations. You just made it to part 2 of the process. What lead author Rafaela Hassine, a postdoctoral researcher at Durham University, calls the main body, or performing the action proper. That is the meat of the thing. You're doing all the chatting, the hand gestures, the jokes, the brainstorming, you're catching up or you're planning, you're scanning your totally not embarrassing purchase with the cashier at Target, that kind of thing. At the end, well, then comes my favorite part 3 of the process, the fucking end, and we all get to go home or leave. Well, we signal this with a closing or a goodbye that's called the exit phase, which disengages us from the encounter, and this too can be verbal or nonverbal. It can be done with a laid-back expression for a laid-back situation, something like, I gotta go and take little Jimmy to soccer practice. He's not that great, but he's trying. God, it's so expensive. But in a more formal setting, one may express pleasure at having shared each other's company and then proceed to project future encounters. For example, see you at whatever next week, looking forward to it. Anyway, in any case, the closing is understood by both parties, and thus This is the end of the process. It's all wrapped up in a neat little package. Everyone is respected, on the same page, and feeling satisfied. Well, that's what we want to happen anyway. My friends, the need to have this process and all of its social contracts be upheld it's so innate for us that it can be seen in us, even as children. Quote, in a previous experiment of joint commitment, human children protested when an experimenter abruptly stopped playing with them. Offering toys or vocalizing, the children tried to re-engage the experimenter in their previously agreed-upon play. End quote. From the study's publication press release. So, in this instance of borderline abuse, we can see how us humans, deep down, we actually desire to keep agreements. As the authors so aptly put it, when joint commitments are reneged upon, humans feel unjustly treated, triggering emotions that range from mild irritation to major turmoil. End quote. Now, if I may say for a moment, the irony is not lost on me that I'm actually recording this episode a month before a U.S. presidential election, and it's coming out 2 days after the results. I have no idea what is going to happen. But I do take solace in the recent discovery that, yes, even chimpanzees and bonobos have ways of being fucking cordial. They have their own versions of hellos and goodbyes, all to keep their social fabric intact. Let's get into it. So join me, will you, alongside Rafaela and her colleagues who are doing what they do best, watching a pair of bonobos during the intimate interaction of grooming one another. At some point, though, this interaction was interrupted, and the team, still focusing on the same two bonobos, they saw something they hadn't really noticed previously. The reunited bonobos used gestures, and then, in an unspoken act, both resumed grooming. It was this simple moment that led the team to ask an earth-shaking question: do great apes have a similar interaction, entry, and exit process the way us humans do? Do they also have a process of setting up an agreement and then mutually deciding afterwards that the agreement has been fulfilled? Because it seemed, with this particular pair, that they had an agreement, but it wasn't fulfilled, so they had to get back at it. The grooming needed to be completed, y'all. I mean, I don't know about you, but you don't stop midway when you say you're going to clean a bonobo. Anyway, you might be asking, okay, so we're doing this. Not grooming bonobos, but determining if great apes have the equivalent of a hello and a goodbye. But how, though? And wait. Why are we doing this again? Well, great questions, my tidy business goose. Let's start with the short answer. These two species, chimpanzees and bonobos, they share over 98% of our DNA and diverged from us way more recently on the evolutionary tree than other apes. So, observing the social constructs that we share, or those that we don't, can explain when these traits may have evolved. Because behavior doesn't fossilize. Said Rafaela in the press release, quote, you can't dig up bones to look at how behavior has evolved, but you can study our closest living relatives, great apes like chimpanzees and bonobos. End quote. So, how do we do this? How do you even start? Wow, pack your bags, because we need to take a little whirlwind trip to several zoos on several continents. According to the study, the team collected observational data from 2 groups of bonobos and 3 groups of chimpanzees at 3 zoological sites, looking at a total of 50 individuals. I think we should meet them. And their cribs, what do you say? Awesome. First up, San Diego, USA, where one group of bonobos was peeped on from January to April of 2017. Their ages ranged from a wee 4 years old to 44. And at their disposal at the San Diego Zoo was an outdoor and an indoor enclosure. Outside was decked out with climbing structures, a freshwater stream, and what was called elements of enrichment, which included supplementary feeds several times a week, like honey, peanut butter, popcorn, and seeds provided through enrichment toys. So, okay. That's pretty good. I think we can relate. Next up, a second group of bonobos at oh no, it's French, guys. Oh no. The second group of bonobos at La Vallée de Seine, France. This was from April to September of 2017, and I'm sure I nailed that. Their ages ranged from 4 to 52 years old this time around. And in this same time period and at the same zoo, a trained research assistant collected data from a group of chimpanzees. But get this. The apes at La Vallée, well, they're housed in large enclosures consisting of an outdoor island-type enclosure with a forest and a grassy climbing structure. And when I say large, holy shit, y'all, I'm talking 8,000 square meters for the bonobos and 7,500 square meters for chimpanzees. Now, I'm not throwing any shade, but for comparison, in San Diego, the total enclosure was about 900 square meters. Okay, this is 8,000 and 7,500. And the apes in France could enrich themselves by doing their own foraging for berries. They could forage. That's a spa. Anyway, okay, a second group of chimpanzees was recorded at Basel Zoo, Switzerland, from October 2016 to February of 2017. The chimpanzees here were housed in a building comprised of 6 lodges in the inside closure and then 2 more in the outside closure. And this part I thought was fantastic. Not only could they freely roam between all the lodges, 2 of them were not visible to visitors, so they had privacy. They could take a break from being looked at. And wow. And finally, a third group of chimpanzees at La Réserve Africaine de Sijan, France. Again, that was perfect. This was from June to August of 2018. They have not 1 but 2, 1.3 hectares of outdoor island area, and the group is provided with food 6 times a day. Damn. As an American, I'm really considering becoming a great ape in France. It's really lovely. I can only dream. And move on to how the team recorded interactions for the study. It wasn't fancy, but god damn it, it worked. They used an iPad 6 and FileMaker Pro 15, focusing on social interactions such as grooming and play. So, after 1,242 interactions within groups were recorded, what did they find? Drumroll, please. Thank you in the back. Why, yes, the apes did in fact frequently gaze at and communicate with each other to start and end interactions. Bonobos exchanged entry signals and mutual gazes 90% of the time, and chimps 69% of the time. And get this, exit phases were even more common, with 92% of bonobo and 86% of chimpanzee interactions involving exits. 92% and 86%. That is exceptionally high. And I could see your expression on your face from here. It's saying, that is fucking polite. But wait, did entry signals and these exits, did they change with who was exhibiting them to who? And wait, we didn't talk about what they were. What are they exactly? Great questions, my responsible business goose. Researchers did consider factors like how close the apes were to each other socially, and who had more influence in the group as a whole. As for bonobos, the closer they were to each other, the shorter the duration of their entry and exit phases. They just texted the word hey, and that's it, because they had that level of familiarity. But when it came to chimps, this is interesting. The level of friendship and the strength of the social bond had no effect on entries or exits at all. And this may be because of how they're structured. Chimps maintain rank with physical aggression, while bonobos order their societies by friendship and alliances, which are maintained by this grooming and play. As to what the entries and exits consisted of, wow, I am so excited about this. I've got you, don't worry. Please, head on over to our social media stuffs and tap on today's post. We are going to slide through some screenshots of bonobos and chimps saying hello and goodbye. I'll give you a second to pull that up. Okay, first, we've got what researchers call a grooming interaction between bonobos of strong social bond and equal rank, and this is going to center around an entry phase. This is, if you look at that green arrow right there, that is David. He's a male, and he is the phase initiator, and he's approaching Daniela, a female, and he's with like a nonchalant walk. And if you swipe through, you can see the moment they both mutually gaze at each other. The gaze is held for like a second, and that means David is getting his hair did, and Daniela is going to be taking care of it. They have an agreement, and they're going to do it. Next up, if you swipe past this, you're going to see another grooming interaction between chimpanzees this time. This is a strong social bond between these two, but there's a large rank difference, and you can tell because Medino, he's a very tiny young male, and you can see he's kind of hesitantly walking towards another chimp called Machiari. She's an older, larger female. Both do the gaze thing, and then Machiari, she uses she just manhandles this little chimp. She grabs him, touching his shoulder and his back, and then finally pulling him at his hips, like, all right, come on, let's do this already, stop moving, kid. And then she starts grooming him on the shoulder once he sits in close proximity. And then finally, if you swipe past this, my favorite. This is a grooming interaction between bonobos of a weak social bond and a large rank difference. And this time around is going to be an exit phase. This is fantastic. Okay, swipe through. You're going to see Molly. She's a female grooming another female named Loretta. Eventually, Molly, the phase initiator, Molly just stops grooming Loretta. But before she leaves, I kid you not, swipe through, and you'll see that Molly leans to the side, like into the visual field of Loretta, and they make eye contact. And Molly is like, I'm tired. I can't do this anymore, Loretta. You're a mess. You're a fucking mess. And Loretta has a look on her face that she understands, and Molly just walks away. So in sum, my approachable business goose signals included gestures like touching and manhandling or gazing at each other, but also holding hands was recorded and butting heads. So the next time you walk up to your friend, headbutt them and tell them that's how chimps and bonobos do it. I'm sure its meaning will be communicated in the same way. In the meantime, this study has made history. It certainly challenges the long-held claim that joint commitment is only a human thing. After the break, I'm so excited about this story. Another animal that just noped out and said goodbye. They're on the run, or the fly, whatever. They're absolutely living life. Oh my God, how a single human slip-up led to a tale that's decades long and equally enjoyable. This one is so fucking fun. I'm so excited. Stay tuned.
Our bodies come in different shapes and sizes, so doesn't it make sense that our weight loss plan should too? Noom builds a personal plan that factors in dietary restrictions, medical issues, and other personal needs so your plan works for you. One of the things I love about Noom is that it doesn't feel restrictive. Instead of focusing on what you can't eat, it helps you develop a healthier relationship with food. You can still enjoy your favorite treats in moderation, which makes it a sustainable approach that I can actually stick to. If you're looking for a personalized weight loss program that actually works, I highly recommend giving Noom a try. It's a program that's helped me achieve my goals and feel better than ever. Stay focused on what's important to you with Noom's psychology and biology-based approach. Sign up for your trial today at Noom.com. That's Noon.com. Go check out Noom today.
Kroger Delivery has one mission: to deliver the freshest food right to your door. That's why our drivers are pros. Our trucks are refrigerated. And when it comes to low prices, we always deliver. With $20 off your first order of $75 or more, there's no better time to get in on the action. Mission accomplished. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
And we're back. We are so back. And my friends, I hate to do this to you, but we're gonna need to head to Texas for a bit. And not only Texas, but March of 2022, a year into the pandemic. But I do have good news. We're about to see something that only a handful of people have ever seen. And there's a good chance it won't be witnessed again for several years. My friends, please join me, will you, at the home of David Foreman in the city of Edna. David is one of about 6,000 residents in this small Texan town, so it's not surprising he's known as the go-to machinist and fishing guide if you've got a hankering for sitting out on the open waters under the infamous heat and humidity that nearby Port Lavaca has to offer. Now, put a pin in that. And for my fellow geographically challenged Americans who are still not so thrilled about where we are and wondering where it is exactly and what could be worth it, don't worry, I've got you. And yes, it is very much going to be worth it. Everyone, please imagine the shape of Texas. Thank you. Point to the very southeast corner, and there you'll find Houston. If you move that same finger a smidge down and to the left, hot damn, we're in Edna, outside David's place, because I just booked all of us on a fishing trip to Port Lavaca, a wee 30 minutes south of here. Our short road trip has ended on David's boat, and we are looking for redfish, or red drum, as they're called, and according to David's website, slotreds.com, you know the one, they are native to the western Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico, right where we are. They prefer shallow waters and are commonly found in estuaries, bays, and along coastal shorelines, so check, check, and check. And if we find an adult, there will be enough to share. They grow up to 90 pounds and 60 inches in length. Now, a 90-pound wild fish is nothing to take lightly, no pun intended, but we're in good hands with David. He's been here countless times, handling these fish, and coincidentally telling his passengers, no, that's not a flamingo, sir, that's a roseate spoonbill. And he's been telling them that just the same amount. My friends, it's time. Please head on over to our social media stuffs and tap on today's post. Swipe past Molly and her tired gaze, and you shall see the striking roseate spoonbill. I'll give you a sec. Okay. I can see her expression from here. It says, oh, that is striking. If a flamingo and a pelican had an affair, it would be this spoonbill. If you thought that, you are kind of right. The body, just focusing on the body, it does resemble the elegant trademark wings and legs of a flamingo, but the neck and the head, how do I put this? Now, all of the good Lord's creatures are beautiful, but let's just say here, there's more exposed skin than one may be comfortable with. The beak is also fascinating. It's like two flat spoons, and that's attached to a very naked head. Anyway, that's not the only notable difference between the roseate spoonbill and the flamingo. This spoonbill is actually native to this area, and it stands about 3 feet tall. But when you compare that to the flamingo, which can reach up to 5 feet tall, it also hails from countries in Africa and South America. Thanks to these staggering contrasts and the literal hundreds of times David has had to correct excited clients, you can understand why. In March of 2022, his knee-jerk reaction to seeing a lanky bird standing on one leg, here of all places, was, quote, "My brain was telling me no way you're looking at a flamingo. But my eyes were telling me, yeah, that's what it is. There's no mistaking it," end quote. He told Daniel Victor of the New York Times. My friends, what do you think? My lanky business goose, please swipe past the photo of the spoonbill, and you will see a screenshot of a tweet provided by Texas Park and Wildlife. Now, David did what any one of us would do when faced with a seemingly ludicrous situation. You take out your damn phone and you hit record. The file was sent to Texas Park and Wildlife, where Julie Hagan, a social media specialist with the Texas Park and Wildlife, she confirmed Pink Floyd, aka Flamingo 492, has returned, and it's back on the shores of Port Lavaca. Quote, "We have no reason to believe that it is any other flamingo," she told the New York Times. So, I bet you have a few questions like, wait, how do we know this is Pink Floyd? Also, who is Pink Floyd? Also, how did it get to Texas? Was it a pet in Florida? Did it make its way up here? And what do you mean it returned? It's been seen before? Well, all great questions and assumptions, my dear business goose. Let's get into it. Join me, will you? Now in May of 2018, where Ben Shepard, in the first goddamn week of his summer internship with the Texas Park and Wildlife Department, saw the equivalent of a bird Sasquatch. Young Ben was in a boat doing intern shit, aka surveying the birds on the islands of Lavaca Bay, when he saw a pink, 5-foot-tall bird about 100 yards away, just chilling with a flock of seagulls. Prior to David, in 2022, this was the last time anyone bore witness to escapee 492, who had been wild and free since 2005. My friends, I've been charging up the old time machine because we need to head on back to that same year, where a few substantial events occurred. 1, North Korea declared it had nuclear weapons. 2, a European spacecraft landed on Saturn's moon Titan. And 3, a pair of exceptionally floofy flamingos in Sedgwick County Zoo of Wichita, Kansas, found themselves with the ability to fly. For you see, my glamorous business goose, just 2 short years ago, in the summer of 2003, a different flock, a group of 40 flamingos from the African nation of Tanzania, were imported to the southern American state of Kansas. And I digress, and I will move on to say that the birds were not newborns, but were, quote, probably around 3 years old, said Scott Newland, the curator of birds at the zoo. Scott said this to Daniel Victor of the New York Times. Now, this fact is an important one. Scotty went on to say if the birds had arrived as newborns, they would have been kept completely flightless by essentially, quote, amputating a part of the wing in which they had not yet developed sensation before the bone was formed, end quote. But because this group had developed their wings, staff had to resort to another procedure to keep the birds grounded, a process that's way less intense. Essentially, the birds get the equivalent of a haircut. Feathers are trimmed and thinned out every year. This needs to be done as birds molt their feathers and replenish them with new, full ones, giving them the ability to carry their weight in flight. And I'll give you one guess as to what happened. That's right. The staff lost track of which bird got which haircut. Specifically a young bird with a tag around its right leg. A tag that read 492. But good news, 492 wasn't alone. In June of 2005, on a particularly windy day in Wichita, a guest reported seeing 2 flamingos out of their enclosure, and by golly, they were right. Still wild at heart, with every step towards the flamingos, the birds flew off, with zoo officials unable to get any closer than 50 yards. The chase went on for a few weeks, and they were last seen by a drainage canal on the western side of Wichita. And my friends, because the universe is funny like that, on July goddamn 4th of all days, Flamingo 347 and 492 were seen making a silent pact and parted ways, with 347 heading north and 492 heading southwest. Our northern flamingo experienced at least a month of freedom, and it was last seen all the way up in Michigan at Outrane Lake in August. It's believed a bird like this could not have survived a winter along the Great Lakes. It's rough, even for people. But 492, well, it had a very different fate. It landed in southeast Texas, along the Gulf of Mexico, and the same shallow, salty wetlands that provide crustaceans, sustenance, and the pink color of the roseate spoonbill. This actually mirrors 492's home environment of Tanzania. And I am sure the governor of Texas will be thrilled to hear that. Anyway, Felicity Arengo, a flamingo expert at the American Museum of Natural History, Felicity told the New York Times, because of the similarities, 492 should be, quote, pretty resilient. But I can see your concerned face from here, my friends. You're thinking, that's fucking awesome, but aren't they social? Won't 492 be out there in the world alone with no other flamingo? Well, I am so damn glad you asked. Yes, it's true. Flamingos are incredibly social. So much so, Scott Newland, the curator of birds at the Wichita Zoo, told the New York Times, when a flamingo needs medical attention, the keepers will isolate 3 or 4 together so the injured bird is more comfortable than it would be alone. Even seeing its own reflection in a mirror can calm a flamingo down, end quote. And that really made me change the way I look at flamingos. So, and what of 492's mental state then? Well, like I said, because the universe is funny like that, just a year later, in 2006, after a tropical storm, a Caribbean flamingo was blown into the same Texas region, and they fucking found each other. Yes. In all the gin joints, in all the towns, in all the world, a Caribbean flamingo ended up here. And the newly formed pair went on to be seen together until 2013. Quote, even though they're 2 different species, they are enough alike that they would have been more than happy to see each other, Scott told the Times. They're 2 lonely birds in a kind of foreign habitat. They're not supposed to be there, so they would have stayed together because there's a bond. End quote. Are you crying? Grab some fucking Kleenex because it's not over yet. Since 2013, only 492 has been spotted. And it's not known if the birds parted ways or if something more tragic happened. But 492, it's still out there. Still living its life. And thanks to the intern, whose name I can't remember, and fisherman David, 492 has been spotted as recently as 2018 and 2022. At the time, Its age was estimated to be around 20. And get this, a wild flamingo's lifespan can reach 40. 40. So if you find yourself along the shores of the Gulf of Mexico, keep an eye out. And thank you for rating, listening, telling your friends how chimps and bonobos say hello. It's like looking, it's like, hey, just like that. It's the same fucking thing and a headbutt. I mean, it's like looking in a mirror. It's fascinating. Tell them about Flamingo 492. It's still out there, crossing borders in Texas. Yeah, tell them. And an untamed thanks to the folks over at Airwave Media, the podcast network to which WTI belongs. If you love this show, and you do, you love the other podcasts in this family. So please, stay interesting.